When my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up. Psalm 27 verse 10. My name is David Mensah, and I was born in the woods, left to die, but God had other plans. The first sound I ever made in this world was not heard by my mother or father. It was heard by hyenas. They say it was a moonless night deep in the bush outside a small rural village in northern Congo. The wind rustled through the tall elephant grass, and the air was filled with the calls of night creatures. Somewhere in the darkness, a newborn baby, me, lay wrapped in a thin cloth, placed in a small woven basket, and left between the roots of an old tree. I don't remember it, of course. I was only hours old. But I have been told the story so many times that I can see it as if I were there, looking down at myself. The village shepherd, an old man named Kojo, was returning from checking his goats. He carried a lantern, its small flame swaying in the wind. He was just about to take the shortcut home when he heard it, a faint cry. At first, he thought it was a kitten. Then he heard it again, louder, sharper, and then the rustle of grass as something moved nearby. When he lifted his lantern toward the sound, the light caught a pair of glowing eyes, a hyena, standing just a few feet from the basket. Kojo shouted and waved his stick. The hyena snarled, but strangely, it didn't attack. It backed away slowly, then disappeared into the dark. He approached the basket and gasped. "Ei! It's a baby." That baby was me. My childhood was a mix of love and luck. Kojo and Abina raised me as their own, but they were very poor. Many nights, we went to bed with only porridge in our stomachs. My clothes were often torn, my shoes worn thin. Still, I was surrounded by something more valuable than money, prayer. Every morning, Abina would kneel on the dirt floor, lift her hands, and thank God for saving me. She'd say, "You were not meant to die, David. You will live to show the glory of God." From an early age, strange things happened around me. Once, while walking home from fetching water, a snake slid across my path. Instead of striking, it called, looked at me for a long moment, then slithered away. Another time, I fell into the river and should have been swept away, but a log floated right to me, and I clung to it until someone pulled me out. The other children in the village called me the foundling and sometimes mocked me. "No mother, no father," they'd chant. But I noticed something, even when they mocked me, they never tried to harm me. It was as if something invisible stood between me and danger. When I was 8, my world shifted. Kojo passed away quietly one night. A month later, Abina fell sick and died too. I was suddenly alone. When Abina died, I was only 8 years old, too young to walk, too old to be pitied. I drifted into the nearest town, and the streets became my home. In the beginning, I begged for scraps, sleeping under shop awnings or in empty market stalls. But hunger changes you. It makes you desperate. That's how I met Kwaku, the leader of one of the street gangs. "You're fast on your feet," he said, tossing me half a loaf of bread. "If you run with us, you'll never go hungry again." I joined. At first, I was just a lookout. Then I began picking pockets, slipping into unlocked shops at night, running errands that I knew were not legal. The older I got, the more I was trusted. I learned the gang's codes, their safe houses, the fastest alleys to disappear into. By the time I was 14, I had rank. I was one of Kwaku's most reliable boys. We lived by our own rules. The police feared us because we never stayed in one place too long, and we always had someone watching the streets. One hot afternoon, everything changed. We spotted a shiny black SUV parked at the edge of the market. The windows were down, the keys still in the ignition. It was the kind of thing that never happened in the city. Cars like that were always locked tight. Kwaku grinned. Boys, this is God answering our prayers. We all piled in, laughing. The trunk was stuffed with groceries, rice, canned meat, bottled drinks, sacks of sugar, enough food to feed the whole gang for a month. There was a bag under the seat. Inside, stacks of crisp notes. None of us had ever seen so much cash in one place. We drove the car back to our hideout. But even as we laughed, I noticed something strange. My friend Joseph, who was driving, kept frowning. "This road, we've taken it 100 times, he muttered, but why does it look different?" I thought he was joking. But later, another boy whispered to me, "When I got into that car, I heard voices, like people arguing, but no one was there." That night, the gang feasted. Pots boiled over with stew, meat sizzled on the fire. They ate and drank until they couldn't move. I stayed to the side, my stomach too knotted to eat. Something about the whole thing felt wrong. The next morning, it began. Kwaku woke with a fever so high he couldn't speak. By noon, 2 of the boys had collapsed with vomiting and diarrhea. Another screamed all night, clutching his head, saying he could hear drums pounding in his skull. By the end of the week, 10 were in the hospital, 5 were dead, and the rest were losing their minds. That's when the rumor started. A woman from the market told us in hushed tones that SUV belonged to Nana Owusu, the rich man who lives on the hill. People say he left it there for a ritual. Anyone who touched it would be cursed, and those who ate the food would be the first to go. My blood went cold. I hadn't eaten the food. I hadn't taken a ride in the car. I hadn't touched the money. Poverty had made me desperate, but that day something deep inside had warned me, don't touch it. By the end of the month, 23 of the 25 boys who had been there were either dead, in the hospital, or wandering the streets mad. Only me and Joseph remained. Joseph came to me one evening, his face pale. "David, we have to get out. Last night I dreamed that same SUV was chasing me. And when I woke up, I swear I saw it parked outside my shack." That was it for me. I wasn't going to wait for whatever had taken my friends to find me. I thought of the small church near the market, the one I had passed many times but never entered. I remembered hearing they had a pastor who prayed for people and they were healed. "Joseph," I said, "we're going to the pastor's house. If God doesn't protect us, we're finished." We left that same night, never looking back. The Sunday after the cursed car incident, Joseph and I walked into a small church at the edge of town. We didn't plan to tell anyone what had happened, the sickness, the deaths, the whispers about Nana Owusu's ritual. We just wanted somewhere safe to hide for a while, a place where maybe whatever was following us wouldn't find us. The church was modest, wooden benches, peeling paint on the walls, the smell of dust and candle wax in the air. A tall man with a broad smile greeted us at the door. "Welcome, my sons. I'm Pastor David. Sit, hear the word, and let your hearts be at peace." Something about his voice put us at ease. We sat in the back, said nothing, and kept our heads down. After the service, Pastor David walked right up to us. "You boys are new here. Do you have work?" Joseph and I glanced at each other. "No, sir." "Well," he said warmly, "we can change that. Come on Monday. We'll give you small jobs, cleaning around the church, helping some of the congregation with chores. You learn something and keep busy." How does that sound? It sounded like a miracle. That Monday, we started. The work wasn't hard, sweeping the compound, helping an old widow fetch water, carrying goods for one of the deacons. The pay was small, but it meant food in our stomachs and a roof over our heads for the first time in months. What surprised me most was how welcoming the church members were. Nobody asked about our past. Nobody seemed to mind that our clothes were worn and our accents marked us as boys from the streets. For a while, I thought we had found a new beginning. One Friday afternoon, we went back to the old market to buy bread and soap. We didn't think anyone would notice us there, but as soon as we walked in, a familiar voice called out. It was the old woman who had once warned us about the cursed car. Her eyes widened when she saw us. "Ei. My boys, you are alive. How are you? Where have you been?" "We've been working," Joseph said with a small smile. "We found a good boss." She leaned closer. "Who is this boss?" I shrugged. "He's a friend of our pastor. Very rich man. Owns a big house on the hill. The pastor says he helps the church a lot." The woman's face drained of color. She whispered like she was afraid the air itself was listening. "That rich man, does he go by the name Nana Owusu?" My stomach dropped. Joseph froze. "Yes," I said slowly. She shook her head. "Leave. Now. If you are working for him, you are walking straight into the grave. I told you before, he is not just rich. He is deep in things you can't fight with your hands. Run, before he decides you are no longer useful." That night, Joseph and I didn't sleep. We didn't even go back to the church. At dawn, we left town, heading 3 towns away, swearing never to return. But whatever had been in that cursed car wasn't finished with us. At first, it was little things. Forgetting what day it was. Waking up miles from where we had fallen asleep. Then it got darker. Every time we got into a car, bus, taxi, even the back of a truck, we would hear voices. Not clear, but enough to know they weren't ours. And with the voices came thoughts that weren't ours either, urges to cause accidents, to push the driver, to grab the wheel. Joseph and I fought it, but the strain was killing us. We were sick more often than not. My skin grew pale, my appetite vanished. And worst of all, we were alone again, no family, no friends, no money. The streets felt colder than they had before. One evening, I sat outside a small supermarket, my head in my hands, wondering if I should just let whatever was following me take me. That's when I heard a voice say my name. "David." I looked up. A man in his 40s was standing there, holding a grocery bag. His eyes were sharp, but kind. "You don't know me," he said, "but I knew Kojo, the man who found you as a baby. I am Myra. He used to call you his miracle boy." I blinked. "You knew Kojo?" He nodded slowly. "And I can see you're in trouble. Do you want to tell me what's going on?" Something in me broke. For the first time since the cursed car, I told the whole truth: the gang, the stolen SUV, the food, the money, the sickness, the deaths, the strange jobs, and finally, the voices. When I finished, he just stared at me for a moment, then said, "David, you've been carrying something that isn't yours. And you can't fight this on the street." Myra was a true pastor, not the smiling church front that hid dark connections. He took me in that very night, gave me a bed, food, and prayed over me with an authority I had never felt before. "This is not how your story ends," he said as he laid his hand on my head. "God saved you once in the woods, and He's going to save you again. The devil has marked you because of the calling on your life, but God has already put His seal on you." I didn't know it then, but stepping into Myra's house was the turning point. From there, everything began to change, slowly, painfully, but undeniably toward the destiny God had written for me. When Myra took us in, He didn't just give us shelter, He gave us direction. Within a month, He had enrolled Joseph and me in a local vocational school. I started training as a carpenter, while Joseph took up electrical work. For a moment, it felt like life was finally moving forward. But the shadows weren't done with us yet. Every few weeks, I'd fall sick, fever, chills, weakness that left me barely able to walk. Sometimes, the voices would return, whispering in the night or when I passed certain streets. They were quieter than before, but they were there, like a shadow lurking just out of sight. Myra noticed. One night after dinner, he sat us down. "Boys," he said, "this isn't just bad luck. This is spiritual warfare. You can't build a new life until the old chains are broken. We have to go through deliverance." I thought it would be a week, maybe 2. It took a full year. The prayers were intense, sometimes hours of calling on the name of Jesus, fasting, and worship. Myra invited trusted intercessors to join. And with every prayer session, more things began to surface. One evening, during a particularly heavy prayer, I suddenly began to cry, not like a boy, but like an infant. My whole body shook, and I could hear myself saying, "Don't let them take me. Don't let them take me." Afterwards, Myra sat me down. "David, you just relived your birth." In the weeks that followed, the truth came out. Through prayer and conversations with people from my birth region, Myra pieced the story together. My biological mother had been promised to a powerful man in a neighboring village. When she became pregnant, she discovered that her child, me, was to be used as a ritual sacrifice to seal his political and financial power. Terrified, she ran. She traveled for days, hiding from those who were sent after her. When she went into labor in the bush, she remembered an old couple she had heard about, Kojo and his sister Abina, who lived on the outskirts of a village. She gave birth in the woods, cleaned me as best as she could, and placed me near the old couple's home, praying they would find me. She fled again before dawn, afraid her pursuers would be close. When Kojo died years later, she lost track of where I was. She thought I might be dead. Myra's eyes shone as he told me this. "David, your life was marked for destruction before you could take your first breath, but God said no. He placed you exactly where you needed to be." The deliverance continued. Both Joseph and I faced nights of violent dreams, running from dark figures, hearing drums, feeling hands on our throats in our sleep. Sometimes we'd wake to Myra praying in the next room, calling down the fire of God. Joseph fought his own battles. The same spirits from the curse card that had tormented him now came in different forms, tempting him to quit school, to go back to the streets. But he resisted. After a year, the weight began to lift. We laughed more. We slept without nightmares. And then one afternoon, Myra came home with a smile so wide I thought he might burst. "David," he said, "I have news. Your mother, she's alive. And she's looking for you." The words didn't register at first. My mother. The woman I'd imagined for years but had no memory of. "She's in a village 3 hours from here," Myra continued. She heard of a pastor who had taken in a boy left in the woods long ago. "She came to me yesterday. She's been searching for you all this time." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. My heart pounded with joy and fear. What would I say? What would she look like? The next Saturday, we drove to her village. When she saw me step out of the car, she froze, her hands trembling. Then she ran, faster than I thought possible for a woman her age, and threw her arms around me, weeping. "My son, my David, you are alive. You are alive." I held her tightly, and in that moment, every unanswered question, every night of wondering why I had been left in the woods, began to make sense. I was never abandoned. I was hidden. God had spared me for a purpose, one that was only beginning to unfold. Meeting my mother changed everything. For the first time in my life, I knew where I came from. But even more than that, I finally understood why my life had been such a battlefield. I had been marked from birth because of the destiny God had placed on me. Myra didn't let me stay in that emotional high for long. The very next week, he sat me down and said, "David, the enemy didn't stop coming after you just because you've been found. In fact, he'll try harder now. You must stay in God's presence and keep moving toward your purpose." That purpose began to unfold quickly. One Sunday after service, a visiting pastor called me out during prayer. "Young man," he said, looking me in the eye, "God says you will touch lives across nations. You will be a father to many who have no father. But the road will not be without fire. Stand firm, and nothing will take you down." I didn't fully understand it, but my spirit knew it was true. A few months later, I received a full scholarship to attend a university in the capital. Myra had been helping me with my vocational training, but he encouraged me to accept the offer. "God is expanding your territory," he said. The day I was meant to travel, Joseph came with me to the bus station. As we drove through a sharp bend on the highway, the bus in front of us suddenly swerved, flipped, and rolled into a ditch. Passengers screamed, glass shattered, and dust filled the air. We were meant to be in that bus. The only reason we weren't was because I had forgotten my admission letter and we had to turn back for it. If we had been on time, I might not be alive to tell this story. University life was a blessing, but the attacks didn't stop. In my second year, I got caught in a violent political protest near campus. Tear gas filled the streets, police fired warning shots, and I was trapped between two angry crowds. Out of nowhere, a man in a white shirt grabbed my arm and pulled me into an alley. "This way," he said calmly, leading me through back streets until we reached safety. When I turned to thank him, he was gone. By the time I graduated, I had survived more near-death situations than I could count. I'd fallen sick with strange fevers, been almost hit by speeding cars, and once even had a ceiling collapse in my hostel room, but each time, I walked away without a scratch. I began to see a pattern. Whenever God was about to promote me, the attacks intensified. And the promotions kept coming. After university, I was invited to speak at a youth conference in another region. That's where I met Sarah, a young woman serving in the worship team. She had a smile that could light up a room and a faith that ran deep. We started talking, then praying together. It didn't take long for me to know she was the one. But our journey to marriage wouldn't be smooth. 2 months before our wedding, robbers broke into the small apartment I was renting. They held me at gunpoint, tied me up, and ransacked the place. One of them pressed the gun to my head and said, "You won't see tomorrow." Before he could pull the trigger, another shouted from the other room, "Let's go, now." They ran, leaving me shaking on the floor. Later, a neighbor told me that just before they left, they looked terrified, like they'd seen something I couldn't. I believed they had. Our wedding was simple but beautiful, and Sarah and I began our life together with little money but great faith. I didn't know it then, but God was about to open a door that would change our lives completely, a door that would lead to the kind of success I had never even dreamed of, and the fulfillment of that prophecy about being a father to many. Married life started with more love than money. Sarah and I rented a tiny one-room space with barely enough for a bed and a small table. We laughed about our luxury kitchen, a single charcoal stove balanced on bricks outside. But we prayed over everything. When bills were due, we prayed. When there wasn't enough food, we prayed. When sickness came knocking, we prayed. God answered, but not always in the way we expected. 3 months into our marriage, Sarah fell ill with a fever that wouldn't break. The doctor's bill was more than we could pay, and our savings were gone. I remember kneeling by her bed one night, whispering, "Lord, you've saved me from the bush, the gangs, the cursed car, the streets, please save my wife." The next morning, a stranger knocked on our door. He introduced himself as a trader from the next town. "I don't know why," he said, "but last night I dreamt I should give you this." It was an envelope with exactly the amount we needed for Sarah's treatment. That was the first time I truly began to understand, when God has marked your life, provision will find you, even if it has to come through a dream to a stranger. A year later, while still working odd carpentry jobs, I had a dream that changed everything. In the dream, I was standing in a huge workshop filled with furniture. Customers were coming in from all directions, and I was handing out receipts, smiling. Then a voice said, "This is the work I have given you. Build, and I will bless it." I woke up and told Sarah, "I think God wants us to start a carpentry business." She smiled. "If it's from God, He will make a way." Within 2 weeks, Myra called me. "David, a friend of mine is looking for someone trustworthy to manage his furniture store. The pay isn't much at first, but there's room to grow." It was exactly what I had seen in my dream. The job started small, but within months, customers began asking for custom designs. I worked late nights, learning new techniques, improving quality, and soon people were recommending us to their friends. Orders doubled, then tripled. One day, a businessman from the capital visited, saw my work, and offered to partner with me. That partnership became a full business, and within 3 years, we were employing over 20 workers. Our family grew too. Sarah and I welcomed our first child, then another, then another. The house that once held only a bed and a stove now had laughter in every room. But even as my business grew and my home filled with joy, I never forgot the prophecy, "You will be a father to many who have no father." The seed of that calling sprouted one afternoon when I was delivering furniture to a client near the bus station. A small boy was sitting alone by the roadside, barefoot, clutching a torn bag. He looked exactly how I must have looked when Kojo found me in the woods. I bought him food and asked where his parents were. He shrugged. "No mama. No papa." That night, I told Sarah, "We need to do more than just help him. We need to help many like him." She didn't hesitate. "Then we will. God didn't bring you this far for yourself alone." I didn't know it yet, but that boy was the first stone in the foundation of something that would change hundreds of lives, the orphanages. The vision was planted, but before it could grow, another storm was coming, one that would test every part of my faith, my family, and my calling. The year my business turned 5 was the year I thought we had finally arrived. Orders were coming in from across the region, my workers were skilled and loyal, and Sarah and I had saved enough to start planning the purchase of a larger home. Life felt stable. And that's when the storm hit. It was a Friday evening when I received a call. One of my workers was shouting into the phone, "Boss! The workshop. They've taken everything." I raced there, my heart pounding. The doors were smashed open, wood scattered across the floor. Every finished order, every power tool, every piece of equipment, gone. It wasn't just a theft. It was a clean sweep. My workers stood outside, some crying, others too stunned to speak. A neighbor whispered to me, "They came in 2 trucks. It was too organized. This wasn't just robbers, someone planned this." That night, I sat in the empty workshop, staring at the bare walls. I thought about the mouths I had to feed, my children, my workers' families. I thought about the years it took to build all of this, and how it was gone in a few hours. I felt the familiar darkness trying to creep in, the same feeling I had in the streets, the same hopelessness from my gang days. Sarah came and sat beside me. "David, you've seen worse than this," she said gently. "You've been saved from the bush, from curses, from near death. This is not the end." Her words kept me from breaking that night. 3 days later, I was in prayer when my phone rang. It was Myra. David, I know this is a hard time. But there's something I need to tell you. A friend of mine is asking for help. He wants to renovate an abandoned building to house street children. He doesn't have a builder, and he doesn't have much money, but he thought of you. I almost laughed. Myra, I have nothing left to build with. He replied simply, God says build it. I wrestled with that for a day. Then I told Sarah, we're going to do it. We started with our bare hands, a few donated tools, and materials people brought after hearing about the project. My workers, many of them with no income since the robbery, volunteered their time. As we worked, people began to notice. Donations started to come in, not just money, but furniture, food, and clothes. It was as if God was gathering an army for this vision. Within 6 months, the building was complete: bright rooms, clean beds, a kitchen, and a play area. The first night we opened, 15 children slept there. I walked through the halls that night with tears in my eyes. This was the prophecy. This was why the enemy had tried to destroy my business, because God was shifting it into something greater. And here's the miracle. The attention from building the orphanage brought new clients to my carpentry business. People began ordering furniture for schools, churches, and offices, contracts bigger than anything I had before. In 1 year, my business income doubled. The robbery that was meant to end me had birthed my true calling. I didn't know it then, but that first orphanage would be the seed of many. And with each new one we opened, I saw more clearly, the same God who saved me as a baby in the woods was now using me to save others. Today, when I wake up in my home, a real home with enough rooms for my children and guests, and hear the sound of my kids laughing in the kitchen, I sometimes have to remind myself, this is real. I'm no longer that baby left in the woods. I'm no longer the street boy running from curses. I'm no longer the young man fighting voices in the night. I am a husband, a father to 7 children, 3 by birth, 4 through adoption, and, by God's grace, the founder of 7 orphanages across 3 regions of Congo. Each orphanage is more than just a building. They are safe havens for over 300 children, kids who once slept under bridges, begged at bus stations, or were abandoned like I was. When I walk through those orphanages and hear the children singing during morning devotions, I see myself in every one of them. And I thank God, because I know I was saved for this. Financially, God has done more than I could have imagined. The carpentry business that once fit into a single small workshop now has multiple branches, employing over 100 people. We export furniture to other countries. But the best part: every profit we make is tied to kingdom work, funding the orphanages, paying school fees, feeding children, and supporting churches. A few years ago, during the dedication of our 5th orphanage, my mother stood beside me. She had tears in her eyes as she whispered, "David, when I left you near Kojo's house, I prayed that if God spared your life, you would grow to serve Him. He has done more than I asked." That day, I realized something profound: God didn't just save me from something. He saved me for something. I've had people ask me, "David, with everything you went through, being left in the woods, the gun life, the cursed car, the sickness, the near-death moments, how did you survive?" I tell them it's simple: God's hand was on me before I even had a name. Isaiah 46 verse 4 says, "Even to your old age I am He, and even to hoar hairs will I carry you. I have made, and I will bear, even I will carry, and will deliver you." That's my life story in one verse. If you take anything from my testimony, let it be this: it doesn't matter where you start. You can be abandoned, forgotten, cursed, haunted, or broken, but if God has called you, no force in heaven or hell can erase your destiny. The same God who saved me from the jaws of hyenas, from ritual sacrifice, from the streets, from death, is the same God who will carry you through your darkest nights. I was born in the woods to die. But I am living proof that with God, you can be born again into a life of purpose, abundance, and miracles.